Now, the other strategy that could very much win the Democratic primary and the general election is James Talarico. He is a state house representative who has been in office since 2018. Now, granted, he won his first election running in against a Republican. Now, I bring up this context because just to understand where his strategy is coming from. I should have mentioned this too. So, the fact that James Talarico always had to run against a Republican, I'm not saying that because, obviously Democrats versus a Republican, but that's where his challenge mostly came from. Ran against a Republican, I think it was in a special election, then in the general election and won. Then later his district was redistricted at the state level, where it became more favorable for Republicans. So even though he probably could have won, he chose to run in a neighboring district that was more democratically friendly. And in doing so, he won with like 74% of the vote. So, like, smart move. But I guess my point is, right, his early career in politics, he was more challenged with trying to run against Republicans. And I bring that up because that is how that experience informed how he's now running this race for the United States Senate in the Democratic primary. He knows that he'll have to run against a Republican one way or another. So, seeing that he already had success running against Republicans, you'll see how his message is different, how his approach and his style are all different. Now, Jasmine Crockett, one thing I forgot to mention is that, again, her goal is to energize the base, but that is how she transpired into and transformed into politics, right? Her first election was actually in a deep blue district, and there she was in a runoff against another Democrat. She had lost that initial election like 29% to 25%, so it was like 4%, but it turned out to be like a couple hundred votes. So then there was a runoff because she came in second place. So because of that, she won in the runoff. Okay? And then that's how she got her seat in the Texas State House representing District 30. And since then, right, like she's always had to run against other Democrats or like crush it against the Republican in general. So I guess my point being is like James Talarico has experience running against a Republican, how he would have to change his message, change how we like organized. Whereas Jasmine, she always ran against a Democrat, or, that was her bigger challenge. So in doing so, she had to then make sure she was either not necessarily running to the left, but she was like a very reliable, stronger Democratic candidate. And we see that in the approach. So now with James Talarico, his approach, he's also very authentic, right? He is very Christian, values focused. He is very in tune with his experience as a public education school teacher. He was a middle school teacher. He's also has a very different demeanor than Jasmine Crockett. Jasmine is loud. She's fun. She's like ready to throw down. She's a fighter. James Talarico is a fighter in his own right, but he is calm. He's a unifier. He is someone looking to bring people into the fold, using his values, leading by those values. And he doesn't shy away from being a Christian. He's actually studying to be a seminary. So the fact that he's like campaigning and studying religion, like, so clearly he's doing a lot. But also, like, he doesn't come across as someone who is, I don't want to say in it for the wrong reasons, because he's definitely someone who's really putting like the teachings of Christianity out there as a good example, because we're just so used to seeing Christian evangelicals like just weaponize the Bible. But James Talarico is showing another path is possible. So, what is James' strategy? Well, when you look at the electorate, again, we know that it's a majority state. However, we also know that it's Republican majority. We know that there are more conservatives out there. So just by numbers alone, if everyone who identified as a Republican went to vote and everyone who identifies as a Democrat went out to vote, Democrats would always lose. There's just more Republicans in general. However, while Jasmine's strategy is based on turning out the base and expanding the electorate to more Democratic-friendly voters, what James Talarico is doing is trying a broader message to bring into the fold some middle-of-the-road moderate, maybe not exactly Democrats, right? Like independents per se, or let's say more like middle-of-the-road, like purple swing voters. Like you had, there's the Obama 2012, the Trump 2016 voter. There's the, I'm not really far left, not really far right. I just want like common sense policies. Those types of voters, like they're very in the middle. They could be nudged either way. But James Talarico is going after those voters, knowing like, yeah, there's a lot of them. And like, yeah, like seeing how he's running on a progressive message, progressive democratic message rooted in Christianity, that could tap into the electorate in Texas much better than people expect. Because that is something that Beto O'Rourke did not do. Like, Beto O'Rourke isn't necessarily not Christian. It's just that his religious values could not or did not translate in the way that James Talarico can successfully do, right? The fact that James Talarico has a religious foundation, he can use that same foundation to articulate policy, saying like, we should not be letting folks go homeless. That's what the teachings of Christianity, what Jesus would have wanted, right? That everyone has a home, everyone's well fed and taken care of. So he's making that connection a lot more clearly. So number one is his message that's rooted in his authenticity. Great. Number two, it's his policies. Hearing James Talarico speak, he definitely understands that there's a progressivism in what he believes. But more importantly, what I respect a lot is that he drives home the point of the systems and the billionaire class that has corrupted our government and why things are the way they are. Like, for instance, there's a rally he did recently where he was saying, trans people make up 1% of the population. Muslim people make up 1% of the population. I think undocumented immigrants make up 1% of the population. So, and then he goes on to say, the Republicans that harp on about that or, see that as a bad thing, like, they are focused on the wrong 1%. And he's right. We all know Bernie Sanders and taking on the millionaires and billionaires and the oligarchs and the 1%. So leaning into Bernie's message, yes, it's the elite. It's the ultra wealthy. These are the people who are controlling our government and both political parties, Democrats and Republicans. So James Talarico is like calling it out, but doing it in a way that's not combative, that says, we need to hate these people. It's to say, this is a problem, but now here are the solutions. Like, we need to love thy neighbor, be more kind to each other, but also we need to fight for policies such as, right? His healthcare plan is Medicare for y'all. It's not Medicare for all single payer. It's actually a public option, similar to what Barack Obama originally wanted in the ACA until Republicans killed it. But that being said, James Talarico is on board with reforming our healthcare system. Both he and Jasmine Crockett, neither of them have claimed to abolish ICE. I could see both of their strategists saying, don't say abolish. Border security is still very important in Texas, especially along the southern border. So I can see why they might not say abolish ICE. But I do know both of them, deep in their hearts of hearts, want to reform the immigration system because it's very much needed. And then the last thing about James Talarico's strategy, which I think he's done a very good job, is bringing people into the fold and organizing. Now, I'm sure Jasmine's good at that too, but I haven't heard numbers in terms of volunteers. I haven't heard of, necessarily growth. I see there's more yard signs. I see people showing up to her rallies, and that's wonderful. But I've also seen with James Talarico, just last week, actually no, when on February 17th, when he kicked off his Taking Back Texas tour in Austin, he had actually shared that there are 22,000 volunteers participating in his campaign. That's a lot. Now, just for context, I wish he had more, to be honest, because, now Mayor Mamdani, when he was organizing in his Democratic primary here in the city, he had 50,000 volunteers to knock on doors, canvass, make phone calls, and get him elected. And it worked. Granted, that was, former Governor Cuomo, a behemoth in Democratic politics, and it was a former governor. So the fact that Zoran needed 50,000 volunteers to crush it and knock it out of the park, it's an uphill battle, but he did it. James Talarico, for a statewide race, right? 22,000 volunteers, doesn't sound like a lot in comparison to 50,000 for New York City, especially when we know Texas is a much larger, many more square miles to cover in terms of knocking doors and getting the word out, right? So, organizing wise, uphill battle. But 22,000 is great. That's a lot of people. More importantly, what I see as part of the success of James Talarico is that his message is resonating. And I'm sure Jasmine Crockett's message resonates too, but we do see it in the numbers. If you look on both of their Instagram pages and you look at their videos, campaign videos, you'll start to notice Jasmine Crockett gets videos in the hundreds of thousands pretty regularly. That's great. She has over 2 million followers. People are organically resonating and following her to grow support. James Talarico has less. I think Jasmine Crockett has well over 2 million, and he just hit 2 million a few days ago. So he's still climbing. But his videos, they've been at on the higher end of hundreds of thousands and even the millions. So you can see that there is a general interest, James Talarico, his message, right? And even more so now that we know most recently, he went on to do an interview on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. However, that show, the network, CBS, had gotten guidance from the Trump administration's FCC, Brendan Carr particularly, saying that we are going to encourage you to adhere to the equal time rule. The equal time rule is when candidates running for a particular office should be afforded equal time. If it's a Republican and a Democrat, they should get equal time. If it's multiple Democrats, like in this case, they should get equal time. The caveat, though, is that it does come at the behest of a request. The candidates need to request it. So, James Talarico would need to request, I want equal time, or Jasmine Crockett would need to say, I need equal time, or one of the candidates would at least, right? And in this case, because it's also for the Texas Senate primary, you could even argue, this would include the Republicans in the primary too. So, with that said, there's an opportunity for Trump, and he seized it, to really force that either A, James Talarico wouldn't have his interview aired because, equal time rule, if you're not going to do it, you're going to break the law, and we're going to come after you, fine you, whatever. So that would get him to back off and not do the interview. Or if you're going to be a good sport, do the equal time rule. So then Jasmine also has time. So if James Talarico wants, to talk about his campaign, then Jasmine should be afforded the chance to talk about her campaign as well. And that would be great. However, and then I guess by that point, it would also mean all the Republican candidates need to be on the Colbert Show and get their equal time, which would be weird because they're not exactly the most TV friendly, let alone a liberal audience in New York is not exactly fawn all over them. So they're going to have a lot of fake laughter and claps most of the time. But anyway, point is, that was the game plan. Knowing that Trump is scared that Texas could go blue because there is such low support for the administration right now, they were looking to censor, essentially, the Democratic side, James Talarico. But as you may have heard, what happened was that what wound up happening was that James Talarico still had his interview aired on the Colbert Show on YouTube, because the catch is the equal time rule is only applicable to broadcast, like broadcast television, right? The way the message is disseminated. So because it's written as broadcast, the lawyers found a workaround and said, well, this doesn't include streaming. So if you could stream the show online, right, then they can still air the interview. And that's what happened. So because of the media hype around this, and hey, we just saw this happen with Jimmy Kimmel, right? Well, actually, first with Stephen Colbert saying that he was fired from the show and his last show is going to be in May. 2 from Jimmy Kimmel saying that he was fired from the show and then reinstated after this was like the first step of the Trump administration, like ramping up the pressure to based on a joke that Jimmy Kimmel made against the president. So because this already set the groundwork, right? Seeing these 2 instances happen, this was the 3rd instance in just over a year, actually probably under a year technically, under a year that Trump has tried to use his power through the government agencies to control the media or entertainment. So seeing how the American electorate has already been so shaken the first time, they were so supportive of James Talarico, and Trump's plan backfired. Not only did James Talarico get millions more views on YouTube than he probably would have gotten on broadcast, but the fact that now there's even more interest in the race because anyone who's a target on Trump wants to be supported. And the irony, I'll say this, as much as, okay, so I'll say this, 2 things. I am very disappointed in the way Jasmine Crockett framed her message in response to that moment. Instead of saying, I wish Trump would focus on making this country better for XYZ and not terrorizing us, leave James Talarico alone, focus on the presidency that he's clearly falling asleep at the wheel at. She could have said that, but instead she said, oh, well, I don't think that was really, I think that was staged, and I don't think Trump really wanted to get James Talarico off the air, and the people at CBS haven't contacted me for an interview, and I feel like no, they just don't want me on because they have their favorites. So it was actually a very sour message. It wasn't very inspiring or unifying, especially for 2 Democrats who respect each other in a very, competitive primary at a national level. So, and it's a Senate race, but still national because everyone's tuning in. So to see her respond that way, it just kind of shows yeah, I think everything happening, she did not expect the level of critique. She did not expect the pushback, it is racism. There is racism in this race. I'm not going to say there's not, but she didn't expect that, the level that she has been subjected to unfairly. But when she answers like that, it's Jasmine, it's one thing to be a fighter, but it's fight Trump if that's your message. But instead, she didn't critique Trump at all. She actually went after James Talarico's campaign, but even more so saying how come they didn't ask me for an interview? She made it about herself. So, James Talarico, he's even said, if Jasmine Crockett wins, I'll be supporting her the whole way. I have a lot of respect for Jasmine Crockett, blah, blah, blah. And she doesn't say that. That's not as well known in her messaging. And that instance of how she responded to the Colbert Show interview, says a lot. So, look at their styles. Jasmine's a fighter. She goes after Trump. But how she received a lot of the critique in this primary, I think it's getting to her. And I think she's very much, having a hard time pushing through. Now, Zohran Mamdani, right? We just saw him win as mayor with blatant Islamophobia thrown his way, right? The condescension and just being nitpicked for everything he said. He came out strong and he never relented. Only once, when there was death threats, going against his wife and his family. That was the one time he teared up and gave a press conference. But Jasmine, a lot of these moments, the negative in the press, it's just Talarico this, Talarico that. it doesn't necessarily bode well if you let it get to you. Like James Talarico, like sure, he hasn't been asked the same questions, he hasn't been getting the same kind of pressure, but he has managed to again be that unifier, stay consistent and focused on message. He stays out of the drama, but he does always, again, just like Zoran did, reframed his message back to the point at hand. Like, what did he say about Trump? The first thing in his interview, he goes, I think Trump is afraid that we're going to turn Texas blue. So, like, the fact that he, again, reframes it back to the message on hand, wealth inequality, taking on the billionaires and the systems at hand, that's good. That is good politics. So it's no surprise to me when I see a lot more views on his videos. I see a lot more momentum coming his way, this leg of the race, which is very important. Any candidate who ever runs for office, if you can get momentum surging on the up and up during the last week or two of voting, whether it's early voting if you have it, or at least, before election day, that is incredible. And James Talarico is doing it. I mean, Jasmine Crockett is too, but we definitely see it with James Talarico and the Instagram followers, views on his videos, number of volunteer signups, right? 22,000. It's still a good number. Like, he definitely has the organizing and the infrastructure to do well. Yeah. That also comes from a good team. Like, I just found this out the other day. Like, Jasmine Crockett didn't have a campaign manager up until like middle of February. So I'm like, I had no idea. Like, but she jumped in the race in December, and she hasn't had much time to put together the campaign website, policies, all that. I would just hope that, think about this, right? Like, Jasmine Crockett would make a great U.S. Senator from the state of Texas. I don't disagree with that. I would very much support her in a general election. But when you understand, like, her main choice was to get in the race for U.S. Senate because she was redistricted out of Congress, is very different than James Talarico jumping in September 9th of 2025 saying, I've seen the harms of, budget cuts, seen the harms, middle schoolers, what they're doing to immigrants. And, he wanted to jump in the race because that was the right thing to do. And he's the only one in the race, so it's like, you can just kind of say, I'd like, not to say that Jasmine's inauthentic, because she is very authentic. You could just see, like, the reasons are very different with, like, context as to why. And, like, sure, great for her. She's going to rise up, represent Texas, great senator, something that hasn't been done by such a young woman, right? But that wasn't the original intent. And I feel like, James Talarico has a very good shot. Doesn't mean that she can't get elected, because she can, but it's going to come down to who will have the better organizing. Based on campaign infrastructure alone, it sounds like James Talarico, he has the fundraising down, he has the organizing down, or a number of volunteers. He's gotten some media attention. Like, sure, he doesn't have as much name ID as Jasmine. The latest polls has Jasmine winning by 8 points, and that's great. We need someone to be winning. But at the end of the day, like, I would vote for James Talarico. If I was a resident in Texas, registered Democrat, I would be voting for him in Texas, early voting right now through February 27th. And the last day to vote is March 3rd. Tuesday, March 3rd, your last day to vote. If you can vote for either candidate, whoever resonates with you more. But let's not forget, we definitely need someone who's going to fight, deliver, but also, I don't want to say buck party establishment, but someone who's going to make the case that we need change. And while identity politics is a great campaign tactic, it's not my particularly favorite path forward, knowing that it's representation matters, but progressive policy matters more. I'll say that. Progressive policy matters more. To me, I'll say that. So at the end of the day, you got until March 3rd to vote in the United States Senate race in Texas. Please make your voice heard. It's important we have these conversations. And, no disrespect to Rep. Crockett, James Talarico's message on wealth inequality and attacking the billionaires and reforming the systems at hand, like, especially as a unifier, like the way his approach is, like, yeah, that resonates with me. It's not the same for everyone, but that's where I stand. I really hope he wins. But again, whoever wins that race, I will gladly support in the general election in November of 2026. But please make your voice heard because that is suitable for democracy. Hey, if you like what you hear and want to learn more, then make sure to subscribe to Not Suitable for Democracy on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Or you can follow along on Instagram and TikTok. I use the same handle for both, so you can follow along at NSFD_pod.